Hello, welcome back to Uncanny Oddities from around the world. Today we're here with episode 46, The Storm That Could End Privacy. Now, something I've been keeping up with lately is this this story with this man named Roman Storm. So I'm going to go ahead and share some information with you. So this person is on trial because they created an app, and keep in mind this was an open source app, meaning that anyone across the whole planet, like anyone on the internet, hi James, I'm live this time. So this means that it was called Tornado Cash, and basically anyone on the planet could use this app because it was open source and they could modify the code. And he's getting in trouble because some people decided to use this app. I knocked my antenna down. Let me grab that real quick. Okay. Some people use this app to illegally transfer funds, and now they're trying to hold him accountable. Before we get into the details, basically what this boils down to is if it I don't know what words are not allowed on YouTube, so I'm just gonna go ahead and start saying stuff. But I'll try to not get us in trouble. So if a terrorist were to use an iPhone to commit their violent act, should Apple be held responsible for that? If someone were to use a PS3 controller and synchronize it over Bluetooth to control an RC car to commit an act of violence, should Sony be held responsible for that? If someone beats someone to death with a hammer, should the company who made that hammer be held responsible for that act of violence? Because that is essentially what they have done to Roman Storm here. Now, basically, and before we get into the details, one thing that stuck out to me that I would like to point out is they were in the middle of the trial when they asked this company named Chainalysis to testify because they were something that is known as a relayer, which is someone who basically helps transfer the funds. And they do have ties to the federal government. We'll get back to that in a minute. So I was wondering, because the whole thing that happened is this group of North Korean hackers known as Lazarus, they hacked into Rocket Money, Rocket Cash, Tornado Cash. Sorry. They basically hacked into Tornado Cash. Yes, hackers hacked into this app without the developer's permission, and the developer had no access to them or their funds, and now they're trying to hold him accountable for money laundering or conspiracy to money launder. So, yeah, that's happening. And so, anyways, what happened is in the middle of the trial, they tried to ask this other company known as Chainalysis to testify, and they decided they were going to plead the fifth. But I misunderstood at the time, and I got some more details right here that I'm about to go over. I got some notes here, and it turned out that it was not Chainalysis themselves that pled the fifth, but a witness from Chainalysis described as a percipient witness invoked the Fifth Amendment after consultations with the government, refusing to testify. The defense flagged this move as unexpected and requested a clarification from the court. The defense argued that Chainalysis had operated as a relayer for Tornado Cash, which could expose it to liability if the relayer was deemed part of the alleged conspiracy. And that goes a little bit deeper, but we're going to get into that in a minute. So first, I wanted to go ahead and share this article I found on what's going on and basically give you, some of the basics. So let me pull this up real quick. Share screen. right here. All right. So this article over here, there was a mistrial in Tornado Cash developer Roman Storm's money laundering case. So a Manhattan jury could not agree if Roman Storm, creator of Tornado Cash, is a money launderer. The jury deadlocked on whether he conspired to launder $1 billion in dirty crypto or violated sanctions. The jury convicted only on one count of operating an unlicensed money transmitting business. Now, here's the problem. From my understanding, from what I've been researching, Roman Storm created this app for the sole use of privacy. And so he had no access to these users or their funds. He had no direct access. Yet they're still trying to accuse him of helping them launder money simply because he made an app designed for privacy and some people decided to use it for nefarious purposes. And now they're trying to hold him responsible. So this says prosecutors say Tornado Cash was the preferred money laundering tool for the world's gutsiest scammers and hackers, criminals who used the software to clean or launder more than $1 billion in stolen cryptocurrency. But on Wednesday, a federal jury in Manhattan was disbanded after it could not agree on whether Roman Storm, 36, the co-developer of Tornado Cash, was himself a money launderer. The 3.5-week trial ended with a partial mistrial after the jury said that they could not agree on the two most serious charges: money laundering and violating international sanctions, each carrying potential sentences of 20 years in prison. He was found guilty only of conspiring to operate an unlicensed money transmitting business and faces a potential maximum sentence of 5 years in prison. Now, you can look this up on your own, but I'm not going to go through all this because I've been studying a lot of this on my own, so I'm going to kind of breeze through this. Since he named it Tornado Cash, he is up the creek. The perception is bad. All right. Can't really disagree with you there, but naming conventions are one thing. You can't really. I don't believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe that, with the exception of copyright or, stuff like that, you can legally get in trouble for what you name your business. But I can understand how some people may look at the name Tornado Cash and see some, you know, nefarious purposes. And in your defense, James, for saying that, in the prosecution, uh, one thing they did argue on was the fact that nowhere in any of his legal documents, nowhere in his privacy policy, nowhere in his terms of service, disclaimers, anywhere on his website did he explicitly state that he was not responsible for what people used his app for or his service. And now, on the one hand, the prosecution tried to point out that by not explicitly stating that he was not trying to commit fraud or illegal activity, that alone makes him look suspicious. And as much as I will defend him, and I, I can't deny what they say. That does make him look suspicious. But my personal opinion, I believe it was simply he wasn't thinking right, and he probably tried to save some money because lawyers are expensive. In something serious like this, a lawyer can easily cost like $5,000 or $6,000, if not more, depending on how serious you want to take this. And if it's an international business, they can even cost upwards of $10,000 just to get the right lawyer to help you, come up with all the business laws and terms and conditions and all that stuff. So I'm thinking what probably happened is he probably didn't hire a lawyer to help him with his contracts and his terms of service and his legal documents, and he probably just overlooked it. Because that was one of my big obsessions, was if he had put that in there. And I did do some research on that, but even if he had put that in there, it would have made his defense a lot better. It would have helped his defense a lot, but they still could have charged him regardless. And that's one of the complicated things about all this is there's just so many there's so much circumstantial stories and evidence surrounding this. So back over here, let's see where we're at. Let's go through some more of this. So right here, I think Mr. Storm has every intention to stay here and fight. Uh, the one count he was convicted on. U.S. District Judge Catherine Polk Filia said, sorry if I mispronounced that name, said in allowing Storm, a father of one from a Seattle suburb, to remain free on $2 million bail pending sentencing. We are grateful the jury did not convict Roman for violating sanctions or laundering money, defense attorney Brian Klein told reporters. Storm will repeal the money transmission conviction, which has serious legal issues, Klein said. Now, let me mute myself real quick. I'm going to look something up real quick. All right. Well, turns out I can't remember what the exact law was off the top of my head, but if you saw that. But there was a particular law that they are trying to use in the conviction, and the problem with that is it was a very complicated law that is not used very often, and as a result, that's one of the reasons why the jury ended in a mistrial, because the jury simply didn't understand that law. And as for these conspiracy to commit money laundering and conspiracy to this, blah, 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 all that, the prosecution's job in these charges was to try and show that he spoke to an individual and explicitly made a plan to use this app for the sole purpose of laundering money. And they were unable to do that. The best they could get away with is they were able to get him on that 5-year charge because he made an app. And where is it? Right here. Prosecutors had called Tornado Cash a giant washing machine, and they said that Storm knowingly helped criminals launder $1 billion in dirty crypto, all the while pocketing millions in transaction fees. The defense had countered that Storm was merely a software developer and that he had no control over how Tornado Storm, built for legitimate privacy purposes, was used. So once again, just to reiterate, he made the software accessible through the Ethereum blockchain, and we can get into blockchain in a minute, just briefly. Lets users deposit cryptocurrency into a common pool and then withdraw it days later. The process made it virtually impossible for law enforcement or anyone else to track who was putting crypto in and who was taking it out. But once the Tornado Storm software went live, it ran automatically and was out of Storm's hands, the defense had argued. Roman had nothing to do with the hackers and scammers, defense lawyer Kerry Curtis Axel told the jury in the opening statements. This is my big thing. It is not a crime to make a useful thing that is misused by bad people, she said. The government must prove that Roman had a criminal agreement with a criminal purpose, and it cannot. Now, the point in this, yes, never go cheap when it's your own behind. You are 100% right about that, James. Now, my big point in this is a lot of the stories and a lot of the media coverage, from what I've heard from third-party sources, not anything I've looked at directly, but from what I've heard from people I've been discussing this with, is a lot of the media coverage seems to be trying to paint Roman Storm as a criminal who is actively participating in this, when in reality, as you can see right here, he simply created an app for people to transfer money privately. That's all he did. He made a code. And due to this law, part of this law that I can't remember the name of off the top of my head, it's like 1190 or 60 or something like that. I can't remember, and it's kind of bothering me, but laws are complicated. So can you really blame me? But anyways, the point being, that code, as in computer code, is protected by the First Amendment. Code is free speech, and he did nothing wrong by designing an app to give people privacy. The people who abuse that privacy, yes, they did commit crimes, and yes, they did do wrong things. But as I said at the start of the video, that would be the equivalent of blaming your local bank, SunTrust, or Truist, whatever, Fifth Third Bank, that's all I can think of off the top of my head. But Citibank, whatever, that's like blaming Citibank because someone used a PIN code to hack into one of their ATMs and stole a bunch of money from a politician. And they're trying to put the engineers of that ATM, the people who created that ATM, would be held on trial because someone hacked into the ATM and stole your money. No, the hackers are the criminals. I mean, yes, it's terrible. And yes, as the people operating the ATM, I would expect them, for good PR and business rep, to, give you back your money. But that's what the FDIC is for. But that's maybe not the best example. But my point being is that would be like, okay, Facebook, okay? If Mark Zuckerberg was on trial because someone used Facebook Messenger to plan illegal activity, should Mark Zuckerberg be held on trial for what people use Facebook Messenger for? No, he wouldn't be held on trial, nor should he. And that is exactly the point that I'm trying to make about Roman Storm, is that all he did was design an app for privacy, and now he's in trouble because someone else used his app in a illegal way. But it wasn't his fault. He didn't do that intentionally, and it was never his intention for it to happen like that. And I was wondering, because this Chainalysis refused to testify and they pleaded the fifth, I kind of thought that was suspicious, and that's all I'm gonna say. I don't want to, get us in trouble for libel, so I'm just gonna leave it at that and not jump to conclusions. But the jury was deadlocked on the more severe charges of money laundering and sanctions violations, resulting in a partial mistrial on those counts. And legal experts emphasize that operating a neutral technical tool isn't inherently a crime, even if criminals use it, unless there's evidence of intent or participation. And Storm's defense leaned heavily on that distinction. Now, at the end of the day, as I said before, I do have to admit one thing. Wait, not a good example. Texas sued Facebook and Zuckerberg over human trafficking. Okay, James actually made a very good point in the chat here, so I'm going to put that up on the screen. Apparently, Texas sued Facebook and Zuckerberg for human trafficking. And James says Zuckerberg means Sugar Mountain in German, by the way. Okay, that's interesting. But I did not know that. And that is a prime example. I mean, I may not like Mark Zuckerberg. I may not, think he's the best person. I'll just leave it at that. But, I will say that he has the right to not be held liable for what people use his service for. And I've seen, like, I know not many people do, but I'm one of those weirdos. And I'm not saying I read every single one, but every once in a while I will kind of skim through some of the privacy policies that I agreed to and the terms of service and stuff like that. And I have to say, I've seen a lot of social media explicitly in their privacy policy somewhere in those massive pages. I've seen a lot of them make statements stating explicitly that we are not responsible for what people use our platform to do. And if you use our platform for any nefarious purposes, that is your responsibility. So, and like I said earlier, I looked it up and it would have given him more defense, yes, but it would not have made him completely bulletproof. James makes a valid point here. He facilitated it by allowing it on his platform and concealing it. And yes, I won't deny that. But at the same time, at what point does privacy itself become illegal? Just because a few bad people want to use it for nefarious purposes, does that mean nobody has a right to privacy anymore? That's my big deal about this is, sorry. Like, okay, Adobe, everyone is getting into our business now. We don't have any privacy. My phone, I have an iPhone, okay? So I know about Apple's Enclave, okay, Apple? I'm calling you out. I know about your Enclave. I know about AMD's PSP. We have little computer chips inside of our phones operating on their own operating system and their own power source that we cannot turn off. Even if we turn off our devices and power them off, these little chips inside the CPU continue running with unlimited battery power permanently, no matter what we do. And there's no way to turn them off. So, my thing is if you can ban me for a private conversation, then Facebook knew about that. Yep, I'll agree with you on that one, James. I do think Facebook is watching everything we do. And that's why I'm trying to be more careful about what I say in public. And, you know, like I'm not doing anything bad, but at the same time, okay, for example, I'm writing a book. Okay? I'm sure I've talked about that before. Maybe I want my book to be private. Maybe I don't want Facebook knowing everything I write about my book. Maybe I don't want, you know, YouTube knowing everything about my book or whatever. But my point being, I'm not doing anything wrong. And regardless, people have a right to privacy. And just because a few bad people want to spoil that doesn't mean that no one else has a right to privacy. I mean, look at the Patriot Act. The NSA is spying on us right now. I know they are. And I can say that because well, at least for now, still have free speech. For now, anyways. Who knows how long that's going to last with all this government ID verification stuff going on and the UK, censorship and all this child safety acts and all that, you know. And just to clarify, so I don't get, Rob and Spider in trouble, don't want to get them in trouble. These are all my own personal opinions. These do not reflect this Uncanny Earth. These are opinions from Steven and Steven alone, okay? Now, my point being, though, with all this stuff going on lately, I've been feeling it for a few weeks now, maybe about a month, and I'm starting to use the internet less. I'm using less social media. I've started deleting some of my social media slowly over time because if you do it too quickly, they'll catch on. Not trying to say too much about that, but the point is they're watching us, they're spying on us, and I've always been one of those people that didn't really care about my privacy because I'm like, well, I know about the NSA watching us. I know they're spying on our phones. I know everything that's going on, so it's like what's the point in trying to protect our privacy? But now with this government ID for YouTube and Spotify and everything else, I'm going to call it for what it is, okay? You don't want to hear, a lot of people probably don't want to hear this, but it has nothing to do with the children. It is about control. Pure and simple. It is all about control. And at the end of the day, how much are we going to give up and how much invasion of our privacy are we going to accept before we start to stand up? And there's a lot of stuff going on. Like the NSA is listening to us right now. They have that tower, and they're working directly with AT&T. And this, a lot of people are going to say this is conspiracy theories, but you ever heard of a man named Snowden when he leaked all those files? Yeah, when he leaked all those files, back in what was it, 2013, I think it was, when he leaked all those files, a lot of those files validated a lot of conspiracy theories, including they validated Titan Point, which is a NSA listening station in, I think it was in New York, in an AT&T building with no windows. And it's a big, massive data center where the NSA stores all our information. And I've been learning a lot about a lot of stuff, and I can't necessarily talk about all of my theories on here. I can't necessarily talk about all of my theories publicly. And that's why we have to be careful. And that's why I'm trying to speak more like an alchemist lately. And it's just fun, like instead of saying you're tired, you could say that, oh, I don't know. Instead of saying I'm exhausted, I'm tired, I'm sleepy, I could say something along the lines of, oh, the hourglass of the Sandman's mind seeks to consume me. Something like that. See, it's a lot more fun when you say stuff like that. And you could say stuff like, if you wanted to warn somebody about something, but you didn't want to say it too directly, you might say the masks are gaining more power, the fog is growing thicker, and it's only a matter of time before Project Blue Godstar comes to fruition, because they are currently building the masks to help the fog gain more power. Stuff like that. But, sometimes you got to encode your language a little bit so you don't get, in trouble. But I have, recently started caring about my privacy, and I've been trying to do what I can, to care about my privacy, because on the one hand, yes, I still understand that absolutely everything we do is infected, and they're watching us, and I know how crazy that sounds. I know. But hey, we have government documents that validate this. So, whatever you want to believe. But I just wanted to make an episode about privacy and how important privacy is. And even though he was not convicted on the two 20-year charges, he did have that 5-year charge that he got convicted on. And it's just, it kind of sucks for the DeFi and privacy communities, because, well, I don't know. It just sucks, because it feels like it feels like privacy just became illegal. And that's what I've been focused on for the last couple of weeks. And that's what's been really important to me. And James says, John has a long mustache. The chair is against the wall. John has a long mustache. The chair is against the wall. And with that, I think that's good for tonight. Thank you for coming to hang out with me, James. Thank you. Good chat tonight. And thank you for doing the back and forth with me. Thank you for playing devil's advocate. It helps to think about things from both sides. And I appreciate that me and you have this kind of, friendship where we can actually go back and forth without getting upset with each other. Stuff like that. It really makes a difference when you can actually discuss these things without people getting upset about stuff. Thank you, James. Thank you, everyone else that came through and didn't chat, but, just wanted to hang out anyways. And thank you for everyone that comes through and watches this in the future. And as always, stay uncanny. We'll see you next time.